Hi guys, this is Nicholas Copia. Welcome to 256 Shades of Grey Advanced Photoshop. Today we're going to be going over some tools and techniques for you to learn and use in your future designs. First up is the vanishing point tool. I'm going to go ahead and unlock my background layer so it's a normal layer and create some text. Now this text we are going to want to composite onto the cover of the book. And to do this, we're going to use a vanishing point tool. So I have my text here, and I want to copy it to the clipboard. I'm going to turn off my background layer, hit Control A for select all, and Control Shift C for copy merged. Control D to deselect. Now that I have my text on my clipboard, I'm going to create a new layer. And the vanishing point tool will now export to this layer since I have it selected. So let's turn the text off, turn this layer back on, and go to Filter, Vanishing Point. Once in here, you can create a plane for your text to go onto. So I'm going to click the four corners of this book, and it will create a plane. After you've created the plane, which is here, the Create Plane tool, it'll automatically switch to the Edit Plane tool. From here you can make minor adjustments to perfect the plane to make sure that you get the best results. Once you have the plane the way you like it, hit Control Paste, and then you can click and drag whatever you have pasted onto your plane, and it will skew it to match the plane. It's simple as that. From here, you can do things like the clone stamp tool, brush tool, transform tool. You can scale it, rotate. You also have your flip and flop options. So I'm going to bring this back, rotate it a little, hit OK. You can see that it has now put it on a layer correctly lined up with the plane of our book. Okay, so next up is some features added to the crop tool and the newly added perspective crop tool. Sometimes you will get photos that are not exactly right. As you can see here, we have a photo that has been tilted a little bit. A quick way to fix this is the new straighten feature added to the crop tool. If you select the straighten option in your crop tool, you can draw what should be a straight line in your photo. As you can see here, I'm getting a notification that it'll be rotated 1.5 degrees. If you let go, it'll automatically do the rotation for you and take the crop boundaries and place it to where it'll properly crop with losing as little information from the photo as possible. Hit OK, now our photo is straight. Another tool we have is the perspective crop tool. This will allow you to take photos that have incorrect perspective and change it based on the way you would like. So say we wanted this memorial tower to look more as if the photo was not taken from a down looking up view but straight on view. We can click and drag our perspective crop tool out and select the entire area. Now here we're trying to match the plane, match up the lines with the lines in our photo. So I am clicking on these corners and holding shift as I come in to make sure that it doesn't move vertically but only horizontally. I'm going to watch the lines and how they change as I move each corner in and try to match the lines of our photo. As you can see, this has very deep perspective and will change a lot once we get it the way we like. So this is looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and commit changes. And you can see that it has made our lines fairly straight. I'm going to hit Control R to bring up the ruler and drag a guide out. You can see now our lines have become straight. It's not perfect, and you will have to give it a couple tries to get it the way you want, but we are going to call this okay for the demonstration purposes. One thing about this tool is it will make it look as if it has been squashed, so simple enough fix. We'll pull out our crop tool. I'm going to hold down Alt and pull out. Commit these changes. Go to my selection tool, select, hit Control T to bring up the transform. Again, hold Alt and straighten it back out. Now we have a image that we have fixed with the perspective crop tool and is ready to use. Okay, so now we're going to go over some of the content aware tools that Photoshop has added. This includes your spot healing brush tool, patch tool, and others like the content aware fill and content aware scale. First, let's go over kind of what Photoshop does. So let's do a content aware fill to get rid of this fire hydrant. This is the content aware stuff in Photoshop is hit or miss. So it's a good tool to use if you want to try and see if it works. If not, you will have to do it manually. So to get to here, you can go to Fill, Edit Fill, and select Content Aware as your fill. Once you hit OK, you'll see Photoshop tries to analyze the surrounding area and fill it with what it thinks is best. You can see it did a pretty good job here, but it also took some of the building and it leaked into our ground. So I'm going to undo that and try to just tighten our selection a little bit onto the fire hydrant. And give it another shot. Okay, this time it did a lot better. So you can see how sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't, but it's a really quick way to give Photoshop a chance to try to do the work for you. So let's use the spot healing brush tool. The spot healing brush tool is going to just be one click quick fix. You just click on what you would like to remove and Photoshop will do its best to try to remove it. This is extremely useful for if you wanted to remove freckles or a zit from a face. Anytime you want to just remove a spot that's out of place. The next one is the healing brush tool. This one is the same, but it'll give you a couple more options. The main difference is that you can select your source point as to where you would like it to sample from. So say we wanted to remove this wire, I could select a good area of the sky and begin to click and drag, and the spot healing brush tool will act just like the clone stamp tool and replace whatever I paint over with whatever the source is hitting, which is represented by the crosshair above. Now when I let go, you will see the change in what I've painted, and it'll try to match colors and tones. It does a pretty decent job. Another one is the patch tool. This will do the same thing, except you draw out, kind of like your lasso tool, the area you want to patch up. As so. And now you can click within your selection and drag it to where you would rather it look like. So I'm hitting the edges of roofs there, so let's go up. Release, and you'll see it'll try to fill it in the best it can. That one happened to do a little bit better of a job for us. When you are trying to remove things like wires and fire hydrants, you're going to want to get some practice with all of these tools and figure out which one's best. The clone stamp tool is the most versatile and you have the most control over it. And while some tools will work better in some places, a clone stamp tool will work better in others. I'm not going to go into the clone stamp tool too much, but I do want to show you one thing. As you can see, I've been on one layer and been pretty destructive about my edits. The clone stamp tool will actually let you be non-destructive. So say we wanted to get rid of just these two overhanging parts. If I were to click and try to paint now, it's painting on a blank layer. So you can change this by telling it to select current and below. Now when I hold down Alt, select my starting point, and go to, so let me change some settings here. I'm going to increase the size and increase my hardness a bit. So when I select my source and go to paint over it, it's going to select pixels from the layer below, but paint onto my new layer. That way if I ever wanted to make changes or not like it, I could just simply remove this layer and we haven't changed our photo. Another thing that they added to the content aware is a content aware scale. This is very handy in our industry since we're designing on billboards that are usually very wide and not too tall. So say we wanted to use this photo on our billboard and we have a lot of extra water that we don't need, this area here. A quick way to solve this would be edit, content aware scale, and to scale it using the content aware. Photoshop will automatically try to figure out what are the important parts of the photo and the non-important parts, and scale only the parts that it considers are not important. It does a very good job at figuring out that the middle area of the water is not what we needed and kept our house and people intact. To take this content aware scale a bit further, I'm going to show you some more features. So let's create a canvas that's much wider. So we want this girl, but we also need it to be wide to fit correctly into our design. So we're going to hit Control T. Oh, not our transform. We need to go to Content Aware Scale. This option right here is called Protect Skin Tones. So what it will do is it'll look at the picture, figure out where the skin tones are, and ultimately where the person is in the image, and scale only areas with protecting the girl. You can see this does a pretty good job of scaling our background, even though it does deteriorate our rock a lot. I'm going to undo that and go again into Content Aware Scale, and this time I want it to not mess with our rock. So before we do that, we have to build a quick mask to let Photoshop know which area we don't want affected. So with our brush tool, I'm going to go into quick mask mode. And this mask doesn't have to be exact. This is just going to be a quick painting of areas that we don't want the content aware scale to change. Once we get our selection painted, we're going to exit quick mask mode, go into channels, and select this button, Save Selection as Channel. Now you can see we have a mask of the areas we don't want. I'm going to quickly fix the mask as I did leave some parts unselected. So now we have a black and white mask, and the areas that we don't want affected are now black. This isn't going to work for our content well scare. When you're thinking in mask, think white equals on, black equals off. So we want the areas that we want protected on. So to do this, we're going to have to invert our mask. So if you press Control I, what was white will now become black, and black will now become white. So now that we have our areas as white, which equals on in the mask, we can use this channel in our content aware scale. So go back to your RGB and hit Edit, Content Aware Scale. Now when we pull down this Protect box, you can see we have our channel available for us to select. Go ahead and select that channel, and let's watch what Photoshop does now. Now you can see it'll try to scale while protecting the mask. Let's go ahead and commit these changes. You can see by the quick preview that it kept our rock intact, our person intact, and then scaled everything else around it. So that's how to correctly use the Content Aware tool with alpha channels. Okay, the next tool I want to show you is a background erase tool. This is also a good time to bring up destructive and non-destructive editing. If you haven't heard about that before, destructive editing is when you take your eraser tool and erase the information. This information is now gone, you can't get it back. If I was to save and send this to someone else, this is all they would have. A non-destructive way to do that would be to simply create a mask, use your brush tool, and paint out the areas you don't want to keep. This way, if someone else was to use this and needed that information back, they could just turn your mask off and they would have it. It's easy to see why non-destructive editing is the way to go, and you should always strive to be non-destructive, but sometimes you just want to quickly get a solution, and the background erase tool will be good for that. So let's delete our mask, and we're going to quickly replace the sky in this photo. This sky is kind of boring. We want a more visually pleasing sky. So I have this image of a blue sky here, and we're going to replace our current sky here. So let's go to the background eraser tool and go over some settings and how this tool works. Up here you have three options as to how it's going to select the color that you want removed. This tool I almost never use, but it'll try to remove the color that you have down here in your foregrounds, your foreground color that you have down here in your swatches. This option here is going to select the color as you move the cursor. So the crosshair in the middle is where the color is being taken to tell Photoshop to remove that color. So you can see if I select the blue, it'll only try to remove the blue while keeping the green colors intact. If I was to keep going and my crosshair would cross into the green, it will start to try to remove the green as well. That's because the tool is now constantly sampling every time I move my mouse which color it should remove from the crosshair. While that works sometimes, this will be a better one for us, is to only sample it once. So it'll only sample from our first click. Now when we move our crosshair into the green, it won't remove the green, but it will only stick with colors from the first click. We also have our normal settings like contiguous or discontiguous, and our tolerance settings, much like in the Magic Wand tool. So for tolerance, a tolerance of 50 is fine, I'll leave it there. I'm going to set it to discontiguous, so it will remove all the blue that is within my brush area. With these settings selected, I'm going to go ahead and erase our sky. First, I'm going to get rid of a large portion of the sky that we don't need and we can just delete. And second, I'm going to use a background erase tool to get rid of the rest. So let's sample the blue here and just start to erase. And there we go. The background erase tool has done a good job for us in removing the sky. We can now go over here, hit Control A, Control C, and simply paste our sky in. And there you go. We've replaced the sky using the background erase tool fairly quickly, but in a destructive manner. Now we're going to talk about some different masking techniques to remove backgrounds from photos. From here on out, we're going to do non-destructive editing and use layer mask and adjustment layers. So the first technique is called color range. This will select a range of colors and build a mask for you. I have a photo here with a pretty consistent blue background, and we're going to use color range to select those blues and remove it. First step is to double click our background layer and hit OK to unlock this layer. We're going to use this button, which is our Add Layer Mask button. Now there's two ways to get to the color range option. Under Select, you can see it right here with Select Color Range. And once you have a mask in your Properties panel, you will see Color Range here. Since we want this to output as a mask and not a selection, we want it to output to the mask we've created. We're going to do it through here. So we've gone to Mask, Properties, Color Range. Now we're going to select Invert it so we can see our image, and we're going to start selecting colors for it to build a mask from. You can see as I click, it's going to sample different colors of the background. So let's start in this top corner and change our eyedropper tool to the Add eyedropper tool. This is going to add colors to further remove and create our mask with. So we're going to select all the different blues in our background until we get a pretty decent mask, which you can see over here the mask it's built for us. The fuzziness is kind of like its tolerance on which colors it should select to remove. When you're editing this, you want to look at the edges and make sure that not too much information is getting removed. So that's good. So let's hit OK and look at our results. To get to the mask, you want to hold Alt and then click on your mask, and that'll pull up the mask color range created for you. There's some areas where it didn't do its job correctly, and we still have some leftover grays where it should be black. So I'm going to quickly pull out my brush tool and fix the areas that color range didn't quite pick up. You can also see on his shoulder that there's some areas that should be white that aren't. I'm going to go fast for demonstration purposes, but you'll also notice that this doesn't have to be very exact. I can quickly switch between white and black by hitting my X button. What X is going to do is the same as clicking this and switch my foreground and background color. Okay, so that's decent enough. Also, you can see our light bulb got pretty destroyed because in our original photo, it had a lot of blue in it, which got removed. If you want to see what your photo looked like without the mask, hold down the Shift button and click on your mask. This will make the mask invisible. So you can see why our light bulb got removed a lot of, because most of it is blue. So I'm going to go ahead and just hold down Alt, go back into my mask, and remove it completely. At a later time we could come back, add this light bulb back in, and change it to match our background as best as possible. So here's our beautiful background that we'd like to have the boy on instead. I'm going to just paste this background in and further edit this photo to make sure that he fits. You can see that some of the blue is left over in his hair. While Color Range did a good job, we can refine our mask to make it even better. So again, we could click on our mask, go to its properties, and under the Refine tool, click Mask Edge. Once you have this up, you can change how it's going to preview the mask. So we want to preview it on layers so we can see how the final composite will look. There's two options. You can paint where you want the edge detection to be, or we can just pull the radius up and it will go and select all of our edges. If we click Show Radius, you can see exactly what's being picked. So that looks good. Go back here. Now it's done a good job of refining our mask, and it added some nice haze to this. If you want to see what we started with and where it is now. But you can see a lot of the blue still coming through, and that's why we have our decontaminate colors down here. So we're going to select this and drag it up to 100%. Now you can see that some of the blue has been removed from the boy's hair. I'm going to pull our radius down some and see how it reacts with different radiuses. So that's pretty good. We're liking that right there. We're going to go ahead and save this. When you hit decontaminate colors, what this is doing is going back to your actual photo and changing the colors of the photo. It's not affecting the mask. The mask stays the same, but the colors in the original photo change. So once you select this, it's going to output to a new layer with a layer mask. It does this so this way we can always go back to our original photo that hasn't been edited. So if I turn this mask off, you can see where Photoshop has changed colors to make sure that no blue comes through and only his hair is visible. Okay, so now we have a fairly decent mask and we want to bring our bulb back in. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this layer, delete our layer mask, do a quick selection of our bulb here. Control C, Control Paste. Now we've isolated the bulb on its own layer. I'm going to quickly just use my eraser tool to erase the unnecessary areas in our light bulb. You can use the lasso tool or pen tool to get better edges, but we're just going to do this quick for demonstration purposes. From here we need to get rid of the blue and make sure that it's purple instead. So I'm going to create a new adjustment layer for hue and saturation to change the hue of our bulb. Now, to make sure that this only affects the layer directly beneath it, I'm going to make sure to select Create Clipping Mask. That way it's only going to affect the layer directly underneath. From here we can drag our hue over to purple. And you can see his fingers turned green, so let's just go ahead and erase that. Now we've successfully and quickly masked this boy out from the background and put it on our new background. So now I'm going to show you a channel masking technique. This works well when you have a subject and a solid background color with very high contrast. The way to do this is to use your channels to create a mask. Each photo will be different and each channel will give you different options. Sometimes blue will be the best. For this photo, red is giving us a good starting area for a mask. What you're looking for is contrast between the background and the foreground, which you can see in the black and the white of her hair. This one's pretty good, but the contrast is not as good as the red, and same for the blue. So let's take our red channel. We're going to hit Control A, then Control C to copy it, and Control D to deselect. Go back to our RBG mode and go into Layers and paste. Now we're going to change this layer to start creating a mask. A quick thing we can do is a levels adjustment. We can make our blacks blacker and make our whites whiter. Also, we can change some of the midtones. So for here, you want to keep an eye, before we change our levels, you want to keep an eye on the details. So let's zoom into her hair right here. And you want to make sure that you don't lose any details. So when we drag our black out, if I drag too far, you can see some of the hair starts to get deteriorated. So we want to keep that information. So I'm only going to drag to about there. And our whites, I'm going to drag up just a touch. From here you can select your midtones and try to slide some of the midtones around to make our darks darker. So once you've done that, you're going to want to do a couple things to start painting your mask. First, we need to tell Photoshop that first we're going to paint the white parts of our mask. This is going to tell Photoshop what areas we want to keep. So I'm just going to paint everything but the edges of her hair. Now once you've done that, you want to get your background to be black. To do this, we're going to use our burn tool. Now, the burn tool is going to select your dark areas and tell them to be darker. So we want to select what is already our shadows and make our shadows darker. I'm going to take the exposure down and make this a gradual change that it does to our mask. From here you can start painting to make your shadows blacker. The reason we do this is because we don't want it to affect the light areas of our mask. So you can see as I paint, it makes our darks darker without affecting the light areas. Continue to do this until you've darkened the entire background of the image. You can now see that we have what is starting to look like a mask. I'm going to go ahead and go into our levels one more time and tighten up our blacks and whites. Okay, now that we've done that, we can use this as our mask on our original photo. So to do this, we're going to add a layer mask, hold down Alt, and paste in our new mask. Let's go ahead and get our background. And put this in. So you can see just from the channels and quickly painting the mask that we need, we've done a fairly good job. Again, there's more things you can do to make this look even better. We can go into our mask edge again. Kick up our radius. And also decontaminate the colors. This will attempt to remove the green. Another thing we can do to make our final image sync even better with our background is to add some pink into our hair. So for this, I'm going to create an adjustment layer for hue and saturation. Again, I'm going to create a clipping mask so it only affects the layer beneath. And I'm going to go to a color that matches our background. And really pump up the saturation. Okay, once we've done that, I'm going to hit Ctrl-G, put this into a group, and once it's grouped, you can mask the actual group. I'm going to, with the mask selected, hold Alt backspace and erase all of it. Now, once you have this, you can use your brush on white to kind kind of paint back in some of the colors. So I'm going to turn the flow down. Need to turn the flow down even more and take our hardness to 0. And now we can start to paint in some of the super saturated purples. And make this look more like it was meant to be taken on the original background. So that's a quick look at channel masking and how to use it to remove difficult hair from backgrounds. Okay, the last subject we're going to talk about is color correction and just basic photo enhancement. We receive a lot of photos from clients and they're taken with cameras, even iPhones. Here you can see an image that was taken from a client and sent to me, and I'm going to show you some steps on how to fix photos. You can see here in this photo there is a weird yellow tint that's happening at the top. It's crooked, none of our lines are straight, so we're going to need to straighten it out. And just overall, it's very muted and desaturated, so we're going to need to pump up some of the colors and contrast. So first we're going to want to straighten our photo. Again, we can revisit the crop tool, go to straighten, and I like to find the longest line towards the center and draw a straight line like that. Now this isn't perfect. You can see the side of our door isn't exactly straight, but the center of our door did come out straight. And when that happens, it's usually a perspective issue. So I'm going to quickly fix the perspective and try to make these lines straight. That looks good. I'm going to use a crop tool to get rid of unnecessary parts of the photo. Just to be safe, I'm going to uncheck delete cropped pixels, so that way if I ever want to go back, my pixels have not been changed. Okay, now to fix the colors. First, I want to get rid of the nasty yellow we have up here. So let's go to hue and saturation and see how we can do that. The hue and saturation is more than just 3 sliders. You can select ranges based on different color sets. That's what this hand tool is for. If you select the hand tool, it's going to sample a color and then give you a range from what that color falls into. So let's just go ahead and kick the saturation up and just wildly change the color. The outer handles are the limitations to the range. And this is the inner limitation. You can think of these different sliders the way you would a gradient tool. So this could be one color, and it would gradiate slowly to this color. All of this will be selected. And then from this color to this color, it will slowly gradiate out. So with this in mind and my saturation and hue kicked up, I have a good visual of what's being selected. As I move this way more, the door gets selected, which I don't want. So I'm going to move this way. I'm also going to move this inner slider to see how much of the top part of my photo is being affected. You can see as I undo it, more green is added. And the more I constrain this selection, more blue is added, which is what we want. As I drag this in, you can see less and less of the door The more I go, less of the top of the photo. So I'm going to pull back some to about right there. Now we have pretty much the top selected, and let's reset our values. Okay, from here, I'm just going to pull the saturation to desaturate the yellow out, and also test my hue slider to see if I can get it closer to the color of our original brick. So there we go. Now that that's matching a lot better, we can continue enhancing this photo. So I'm going to create another adjustment layer, and this time we're going to use levels. Levels is a quick way to increase the contrast of your photo and change the lightness and darkness within the midtones. If you don't ever like what you've done, you could always reset using this button here. You can also affect based on certain channels. So we're going to do that now. You can see our red channel. All of it's in the midtones, and there's not a good spread from the darks to lights. So to fix this, I'm going to just tighten that channel's levels. Also going to tighten the green some, and our blues a little. Going to back off some of the red here. And some of the green. Here's our before and after. Okay, one other thing we can do is pull up the greens in our tree. So I'm going to select this and just drag to the right. What that's going to do is increase the saturation. Now if I was to hold down Control and click, we can change the hue of our tree. So I'm going to drag it closer to the green to make our tree more green. And there you can see the before and after. One less adjustment layer is going to be the curves. The curves is a lot like levels. You have your different channels which you can affect separately or RGB as a whole, and also some presets. I'm going to go ahead and select the increased contrast preset. Now this draws what is famously known as an S-curve, to where your darks get darker and your lights get lighter. Let's go ahead and reset that. A quick curves adjustment is to go ahead and just select the lower quadrant, pull it down, and pretty much draw an S. And doing it manually is always better than using the preset, as you can watch how your changes are affected. And I don't mind that I have really increased the contrast of this since it's on an adjustment layer. I can just drop the opacity some to a more desirable result. I'm going to select all these, hold down Shift, click on Folder, and put those into a group. So you can see we've taken this yellow casted photo, increased the saturation in areas, and also the contrast. Next, we're going to talk about color balancing. As you can see, this photo is flooded with green and green and cyan from the ride that they're in, and the sun reflecting the colors back onto their faces. Multiple ways to fix this, but we're going to use color balance. You're going to create an adjustment layer, go to color balance, And this you get to edit based on shadows, midtones, and highlights. So we're going to start off with the midtones, and you have your CMY over here and your RGB over here. This is a nice way to visually see the colors and how to fix them. So we want to get away from the cyan color, so we're going to add some red back in. We kind of want to go away from our green, so we're going to add some magenta back into our photo. And a touch of more yellow. That alone has done us a very good job. For our shadows, we're going to do the same. Only this time it needs to be a lot slighter since our midtones have done so much work already. Same with our highlights. Now you can see the before and after. I'm going to take some of the red off real quick in our midtones. Okay, so once you get that the way you like it, we could do a few more things to this. The hue and saturation, I'm going to go ahead and select the yellow and just bring up the yellow in her flowers to make that stand out more. And same with the green. I'm going to make the green of her shirt a little stronger. For one last thing, since we've highly changed the colors of this, I'm going to throw a quick photo filter. This is just going to apply a quick filter to kind of bring all the colors together. Since we're outside, we're going to use a warming filter to simulate the colors of outside. Now when I turn this on and off, you can see it very subtly adds a orange to some of my highlights. Select these, shift click the group, and we can see the before and after. So this is another photo. We need to do some adjustments to it. You can see it's a very dark photo, and a lot can be done to it to make it look better. A couple things extra is some of the coloring in the background. You can see this is a very yellow and red photo, and then we have a blue background and these blue cabinet doors, which are caused by, I guess, a neon light in there. So we're going to change some of the blues so they're not standing out so much. So first, to fix the darkness of this, I want to show you the shadows and highlights. Shadows and highlights is found as an adjustment. If you were to try to select from here, you will not find this as an adjustment layer. One thing we can do to make sure that our photo is not permanently affected by the shadows and highlights is use smart filters. Smart filters are applied automatically to smart objects, so we can go ahead and convert this to a smart object. And when we go to image adjustments, we lose a lot of our options, but shadows and highlights is still available to us. Now, since we applied this to our smart object, it has added shadows and highlight as a smart filter, as signified by this icon. Just the default settings, you can see this looks a lot better. If we select show more options, we're going to get a couple more sliders to play with. So the amount in shadows is how much do we want to make our shadows brighter. The amount in highlights is how much darker we need our highlights to be, so it'll start to decrease some of our highlights. Since our candles are our main highlights and they really stand out, we're going to tone those down just a touch. And we're going to pull our dark areas up. tonal width, you can see how much of width is affected by the shadow increasement. And you can also see how radius affects the way it selects which shadows it's going to increase. For this image, dragging the radius up gives it a nice effect. I'm going to hit OK. Now you can see our smart filters here, shadows and highlights. We can turn this on and off. And not only that, we can double click it at any time. Not our blending options, but we can double click our shadows and highlights at any time and say we might need to make some changes and go ahead and do it. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and add levels to this. Going to adjust our levels just to try to get our contrast the way we like it. So that's a little better, takes some of the muddy midtones out. And now for our background, let's add a hue and saturation adjustment layer and try to fix the blues in this photo. So I'm going to use my hand tool and again select the range that I want to get a good idea as to what's being selected in my color range. I'm going to pump up the saturation and hue and then try to make sure that I'm selecting all of the colors that are found, all of the blues that are found in the outside and in our cabinet. So that's looking good. Let's go ahead and reset this. We're going to desaturate. It's not that the color is blue and we need it to be a color. It's just we don't want the colors to be there at all. So we're going to pull the saturation down almost all the way. Bring our colors to more of a yellow to also what colors are left to a yellow to sort of match the photo more. There we go. I'm going to do a quick curves adjustment on this. Quick S curve. Drop the opacity some on this. And also add one quick photo filter. Nice warming filter, even though this photo is very warm already. Since we've did a lot of changes, I'm going to add a small filter to it. So now we can group these and see what we've done past shadow and highlights to correct the color in this photo, and also see how much we've lightened the photo. So here's our before and after. Okay, again, we're going to go over a couple more color enhancement techniques. As you can see, this image is a very nice image that we got from ThinkStock, but there's always some enhancements you can do. So looking at this photo, the blues are kind of muted. We can bring those up. Also, since we're really going for fall, we can maybe adjust some of the colors of the leaves to really make those stand out some more. Also, since this is our main, the boy's face is our main area of focus, we're going to blur the edges to make him stand out even more. So let's get started. First, hue and saturation. I'm going to select our hand tool and just bring these blues up some. You can also play with the hue and try to get it to the blue we want. I'm going to bring it from 0 to about +5 just to get a little bit closer to that blue. Bring my saturation down just a touch. You still want it to look realistic. I'm going to go ahead and do a selective color as well. Selective color works a lot like the hand tool and hand saturation, except you select by colors. And this will be a more subtle change to colors. As you can see, it's selected our yellows, and we can make them more yellow, or we can make them more orange. I want to add some orange into these leaves. Now you can see we've changed our desaturated yellow leaves to a more orange leaf. Now that we have our leaves orange, we can also adjust how this layer blends with the layer underneath it. So if you double click on this, we're going to adjust our blend if options here. This says blend with the underlying layer if the underlying layer's highlights are lighter than the one above it. So visually you can see the deterioration as I drag this slider, and it's a very hard cutoff. So if I hold Alt on this, it will only select half, and instead of creating a precise fall off, it'll create a gradient. This is allowing some of the yellows in the original photo to mix in with the forced oranges we had added with our selective color. So now we're going to increase the contrast of our colors with the simple S curve and our curves, and pull that down some. Now to make the boy really stand out, we're going to do a couple things. First, we're going to add a blur to the surrounding areas. So let's group up our color correction. I'm going to hit Control A, then Control Shift C for copy merged and paste. Now with this on its own layer, I'm going to add a blur. So go to Filter, Blur, and we're going to do an iris blur. These are some of the new blur tools added to Photoshop in the blur gallery. The iris blur is much like a radial blur. It creates a circle from which the blur will be affected and gradiates out. The inner circle is areas that we want the blur to start, and the outer circle is where we want the blur to fully end up. So since I don't want the boy's face to be blurred, I'm going to tighten the circle in around his face. The slider here is how much blur you want the outside to be affected by. So we're going to make this stylistic and really kick the blur up. So pull this in some. Once you have the desired results, you can hit OK, and it'll apply the blur to the layer. Now, since the edges of our photo have been blurred, This will naturally draw more attention to the boy's face. And there are a few tools. So to show you the before and after, there's before and there's after. That's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.